Welcome, we're live. Let's get right into it. This first part of the video is just going to set the video up. Wait a minute. Sure I can see it. You can see it. Okay. Let's see both of them. There you go. That right.
Nancy Pelosi just made the biggest mistake of her political career. She called the director of national mistake. Tulsi Gabbert's response, Congresswoman Pelosi, let's discuss your family's Chinese bank accounts. What happened next will end Pelosi's career forever. Combat situations. That look, every veteran watching immediately recognized it. It was the look of a warrior who'd just been fatally underestimated by someone who had no idea what they'd just unleashed. When Tulsi finally spoke, her voice was steady as steel, but everyone in the studio could hear the controlled fury beneath the surface. Congresswoman Pelosi, she said, her words precise and measured, since you want to question my loyalty to America on national television. She paused, reaching into her briefcase with deliberate precision. Let's discuss your family's China.
We'll be right back.
television. She paused, reaching in.
We're back. All right, let's get to the next part of the video. All right, here we go.
Pelosi had orchestrated what she thought would be a routine political hit job. She'd appeared on countless shows before destroying careers and controlling narratives with surgical precision. For over 4 decades, Pelosi had been the ultimate Washington insider. Speaker of the House, twice the most powerful woman in Congress, protected by every major media outlet, and backed by the entire Democratic establishment. She'd survived every scandal, weathered every storm, and emerged stronger each time. But today, she'd made a critical error in judgment. She'd agreed to a joint appearance with Tulsa Gabbert, the new Director of National Intelligence, thinking she could destroy this rising threat to the establishment once and for all. You see, Pelosi saw Tulsa as dangerous, not because of her military service or her political positions, but because Tulsa represented something that terrified the Washington elite: authentic accountability. A combat veteran who'd actually kept her oath to the Constitution, now sitting in the most powerful intelligence position in the world. The setup was perfect from Pelosi's perspective. A routine discussion about intelligence community reforms and national security priorities. She'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Discredit, deflect, destroy. Paint Tulsa as compromised, suggest foreign influence, let the media run with the narrative. Host Jake Tapper opened the segment with standard questions about intelligence priorities, but everyone knew this was really about the growing tension between the old guard establishment and the new administration's intelligence reforms. Pelosi started with her usual political theater, praising the dedicated professionals in the intelligence community while taking subtle shots at political appointees who lack experience. But she was just warming up. Then came the moment that would destroy her career. Jake, Pelosi said, turning to face the camera with that practiced political smile that had served her for decades. I think the American people deserve to know the truth about Tulsi Gabbard. She is quite simply Putin's favorite American politician. The studio fell silent. Even Jake Tapper, who'd seen plenty of political attacks over the years, seemed stunned by the directness of the accusation. But Pelosi wasn't finished. Her appointment as Director of National Intelligence represents the greatest national security threat we face today. She's been compromised by foreign adversaries, always has been, and frankly, her military service doesn't excuse what amounts to treason. How the word hung in the air like a death sentence. Treason. Nancy Pelosi had just accused the Director of National Intelligence of treason on live television in front of millions of Americans. What happened next will be studied in political science classes for generations. Tulsa Gabbard sat perfectly still for exactly 3 seconds. Not moving, not blinking, just staring at Pelosi with the kind of ice-cold calm that only comes from someone who's faced real enemies in real combat situations. That look, every veteran watching immediately recognized it. It was the look of a warrior who'd just been fatally underestimated by someone who had no idea what they'd just unleashed. When Tulsi finally spoke, her voice was steady as steel, but everyone in the studio could hear the controlled fury beneath the surface. Congresswoman Pelosi had orchestrated what she...
We'll be right back with the next part of the video. We're going to play that part again. All right, 1 second.
Said, turning to face the camera with that practiced political smile that had served her for decades. I think the American people deserve to know the truth about Tulsi Gabbard. She is quite simply Putin's favorite American politician. The studio fell silent. Even Jake Tapper, who'd seen plenty of political attacks over the years, seemed stunned by the directness of the accusation. But Pelosi wasn't finished. Her appointment as Director of National Intelligence represents the greatest national security threat we face today. She's been compromised by foreign adversaries, always has been, and frankly, her military service doesn't excuse what amounts to treason. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Treason. Nancy Pelosi had just accused the Director of National Intelligence of treason on live television in front of millions of Americans. What happened next will be studied in political science classes for generations. Tulsi Gabbard sat perfectly still for exactly 3 seconds, not moving, not blinking, just staring at Pelosi with the kind of ice-cold calm that only comes from someone who's faced real enemies in real combat situations. That look, every veteran watching immediately recognized it. It was the look of a warrior who'd just been fatally underestimated by someone who had no idea what they'd just unleashed. When Tulsi finally spoke, her voice was steady as steel, but everyone in the studio could hear the controlled fury beneath the surface. "Congresswoman Pelosi," she said, her words precise and measured, "since you want to question my loyalty to America on national television." She paused, reaching into her briefcase with deliberate precision. "Let's discuss your family's Chinese bank accounts." The effect was immediate and devastating. Pelosi's practiced political smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, but it was long enough for millions of viewers to see that this wasn't going according to her script. Tulsi withdrew a thick folder marked with official DNI classification stamps. "As Director of National Intelligence, I have access to financial intelligence that reveals some very interesting patterns in the Pelosi family's international business dealings." She held up the folder like a weapon. "Pelosi family treason files, classified." Pelosi tried to interrupt, but Tulsi's voice cut through with the authority of someone who commanded the entire U.S. intelligence community. "I have the authority to declassify this information right now, live on television, and I think the American people deserve to know the truth about who's really compromised by foreign governments." Jake Tapper was frantically looking at his producers, clearly realizing that his show was about to become the site of the biggest intelligence disclosure in television history. Pelosi's face had gone completely white. She'd spent decades protecting the secrets that kept her family rich and powerful, and now she was sitting across from someone who had access to everything. "This is highly inappropriate." Pelosi stammered, her usual commanding presence completely shattered. "You can't just declassify sensitive information on television." Tulsi's smile was deadly calm. "Actually, Congresswoman, as DNI, I can declassify anything I determine to be in the national interest. And exposing foreign intelligence assets operating in Congress, that's definitely in the national interest." The power dynamic had shifted completely. Nancy Pelosi, The woman who'd controlled Washington for 4 decades was suddenly the one on the defensive. And Tulsi Gabbard, with the full authority of the intelligence community behind her, was just getting started. Now, Tulsi said, opening the classified folder with surgical precision, let's talk about your family's relationship with Chinese intelligence services. The CNN studio had taken on the atmosphere of a courtroom where a death sentence was about to be pronounced. Tulsi opened her classified folder with the methodical precision of someone who'd conducted countless intelligence briefings in war zones, while Nancy Pelosi sat frozen in her chair, like a deer in headlights. As Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, I have access to financial intelligence gathered by Treasury Department investigators in coordination with international law enforcement agencies. What we've discovered about the Pelosi family's financial relationships is illuminating. She produced the first document, holding it up so the camera could see the official Treasury Department seals and classification markings. This is a comprehensive analysis of international wire transfers involving Pelosi family business entities over the past 20 years. Pelosi tried to interrupt. This is a complete violation of the only violation here. Tulsi cut her off with military precision. Is your family's systematic violation of foreign agent registration requirements and congressional ethics rules. Tulsi's voice took on the tone of someone delivering a prosecution opening statement. Between 2004 and 2024, the Pelosi family received over $50 million in payments from entities controlled by Chinese intelligence services. The number hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. $50 million from Chinese intelligence. Jake Tapper finally found his voice. Director Gabbert, that's an extraordinary accusation. Can you provide specifics? Absolutely, Tulsi replied, producing another document. Bank of China, through 17 different shell companies, transferred a total of $52.7 million to various Pelosi family trusts and business entities. The timing of these transfers correlates exactly with congressional votes affecting Chinese interests. She began reading from the official intelligence assessment. March 15, 2019, House vote on Chinese trade sanctions. March 14, 2019, $3.2 million transfer from Sino-Pacific Holdings Limited to Paul Pelosi Family Trust. July 8, 2021, congressional hearing on Chinese military expansion in South China Sea. July 7, 2021, $4.8 million transfer from Beijing Investment Group to Pelosi Real Estate Holdings. October 12, 2023, vote on Taiwan defense funding. October 11, 2023, $6.1 million transfer from China Development Bank to Nancy Pelosi Speaker's Fund. Each revelation was more devastating than the last. The pattern was undeniable. Chinese money flowing to the Pelosi family immediately before congressional actions affecting Chinese interests. But Tulsi had saved the most damning evidence for last. The most concerning aspect of this intelligence, she continued, is that these weren't random business investments. Our counterintelligence division has identified the specific Chinese intelligence officer who's been handling the Pelosi family for 2 decades. Pelosi's composure finally cracked completely. This is ridiculous. These are legitimate business. His name is Colonel Li Wei. Tulsi continued, ignoring Pelosi's protests. Ministry of State Security, People's Liberation Army. He operates under academic cover through the UC Berkeley China Studies program, but his real job is managing American political assets for Beijing. The intelligence revelation was devastating. Not only had the Pelosi family been taking Chinese money, but they'd been handled by an actual Chinese military intelligence officer. Our surveillance of Colonel Lee's communications reveals extensive coordination with Nancy Pelosi's congressional office, Tulsi explained. Phone calls before every major China-related vote, text messages, coordinating policy positions, even dinner meetings at the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. She produced audio equipment that had been set up at her position. In fact, I have recordings of some of these conversations. The studio fell dead silent as Tulsi prepared to play actual surveillance audio of Nancy Pelosi, coordinating with Chinese intelligence. This is a call from March 2023, intercepted by NSA counterintelligence operations, Tulsi announced as she pressed play. Nancy Pelosi's voice filled the studio unmistakably clear. Colonel Lee, we need to discuss the Taiwan situation. The Republicans are pushing for increased military aid, but I can delay the committee vote if Beijing needs more time to adjust their position. A Chinese accented voice responded. Congresswoman Pelosi, Beijing appreciates your continued cooperation. The payment will be processed through the usual channels within 24 hours. Pelosi, make sure it goes to the San Francisco Real Estate Trust, not the Washington account. Paul's been getting nervous about the scrutiny. Chinese voice. Understood. Your service to the People's Republic has been invaluable. The recording was absolutely devastating. Nancy Pelosi's own voice caught on NSA surveillance, coordinating with Chinese intelligence to delay military aid to Taiwan in exchange for payment. Pelosi was hyperventilating, now her face completely drained of color. That's illegal surveillance. You can't use NSA recordings on American citizens. Actually, Tulsi replied with deadly calm, when American citizens are communicating with foreign intelligence officers about legislative actions, that's exactly what NSA surveillance is designed to detect. It's called counterintelligence. She leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on the edge of someone who'd seen real combat. Congresswoman Pelosi, you've been working as a paid agent of Chinese intelligence for 20 years. You've been selling out American interests, compromising Taiwan's security, and enriching your family with blood money from the Chinese Communist Party. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Financial records, communications, intercepts, surveillance footage, and audio recordings all pointed to the same conclusion: Nancy Pelosi was a Chinese intelligence asset. But Tulsi wasn't finished. She reached for another folder, this one marked with Department of Homeland Security seals. Now let's talk about January 6th, she said, and how you deliberately weakened Capitol security to create maximum chaos for your political theater. Round one was over, and Nancy Pelosi's credibility was already in ruins. But the worst was yet to come. The revelation about Chinese intelligence payments had left Nancy Pelosi reeling, but Tulsi Gabbard was just getting started. As Director of National Intelligence, she had access to communications and surveillance data that painted a picture of January 6th that the American people had never seen. Congresswoman Pelosi, Tulsi began opening her second classified folder. As Speaker of the House, you were responsible for Capitol security on January 6th, 2021. The official narrative is that this was an intelligence failure, a breakdown in communication, an unexpected attack that caught everyone off guard. She paused, looking directly at Pelosi, with the intensity of a prosecutor about to present murder weapon evidence. That's a lie, and I have the proof. The folder she opened contained what appeared to be hundreds of pages of communication records, surveillance reports, and security assessments. These are NSA intercepts of communications between your office and various officials in the weeks leading up to January 6th. Jake Tapper leaned forward. Director Gabbert, what exactly are you alleging? I'm not alleging anything, Tulsi replied with military precision. I'm presenting factual evidence that Nancy Pelosi deliberately weakened Capitol security to ensure maximum chaos and violence for political purposes. The accusation was so explosive that even the CNN production team could be heard scrambling in the background. Tulsi began reading from the official intelligence assessment. December 28, 2020, Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund requests additional National Guard support for January 6th. Request denied by Speaker Pelosi's office. January 2nd, 2021, FBI intelligence assessment warns of potential violence. Chief Sund again requests National Guard deployment. Again denied by Speaker's office. January 4th, 2021, Metropolitan Police offer additional officers. Rejected by Speaker's office. January 5th, 2021, final request for enhanced security measures. Denied. The timeline was damning. Multiple requests for additional security, all rejected by the one person who had the authority to approve them, Nancy Pelosi. But the communications intercepts were even worse. These are text messages between Congresswoman Pelosi and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on January 5th. Tulsi announced reading from her classified documents. Pelosi to AOC, tomorrow needs to look really bad. The worse it looks, the more it helps us destroy Trump forever. AOC response, how bad are we talking? People could get hurt. Pelosi, that's the point. A few injuries, some broken windows, plenty of dramatic footage. The media will run with it for months. The text exchange was absolutely chilling. The Speaker of the House and a prominent Congresswoman discussing how to make January 6th look really bad for political purposes. Pelosi was now visibly shaking her usual commanding presence, completely shattered. Those texts are fabricated. This is a complete... The NSA doesn't fabricate text messages, Congresswoman, Tulsi interrupted. They intercept them, verify them, and archive them as part of counterintelligence operations. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. This is a recorded call between your chief of staff and the Capitol Police on the morning of January 6th. Tulsi announced preparing to play another piece of surveillance audio. The recording quality was crystal clear, obviously from professional NSA equipment. A voice identified as Pelosi's chief of staff could be heard giving explicit instructions. The speaker wants minimal police presence in the outer perimeter. We need them to be able to get close to the building for better optics. A Capitol Police supervisor's voice responded, "Ma'am, that goes against all our security protocols. If they breach the outer perimeter, Chief of Staff, that's exactly what we want. The speaker needs footage of them actually getting into the Capitol. A few broken windows, some dramatic confrontations. Just make sure the members are safely evacuated before it gets too chaotic." Capitol Police. You're asking us to deliberately allow a security breach, Chief of Staff. I'm asking you to follow the Speaker's direct orders. She controls your budget, your leadership appointments, everything. Do you understand? The audio was devastating. Nancy Pelosi's own staff ordering Capitol Police to deliberately weaken security to allow protesters to breach the building for better optics. But that's not even the worst part. Tulsi continued, her voice taking on the edge of someone who'd lost friends to political corruption. Our intelligence shows that you knew exactly what would happen because you helped plan it. She produced another document, this one bearing the seal of the Department of Homeland Security. This is a DHS assessment of social media coordination in the weeks before January 6th. It shows systematic manipulation of online groups by accounts linked to Democratic political operatives. The assessment detailed how fake social media accounts had been used to amplify calls for violence, coordinate timing, and ensure maximum chaos. The digital fingerprints led back to organizations with direct ties to Democratic leadership. You didn't just allow January 6th to happen, Tulsi said, her voice rising with moral authority. You helped orchestrate it. You deliberately created the conditions for violence, then used that violence to justify a massive expansion of your political power. She leaned back, letting the weight of evidence settle over the studio. 13 people died as a result of January 6th. Capitol police officers committed suicide. Families were destroyed. Democracy was damaged. All so Nancy Pelosi could have dramatic footage for her political theater. The human cost of Pelosi's manipulation was staggering. Real people had died. Real families had been destroyed, all for political gain. Pelosi tried one last desperate defense. This is all conspiracy theory nonsense. You're taking isolated communications out of context. The context, Tulsi replied with devastating finality, is that you sacrificed American lives for political power. You turned the capital of the United States into a stage for your own personal drama, and people died because of it. She reached for her third folder, this one marked with Securities and Exchange Commission seals. Now, let's talk about how your family has been systematically looting the American economy through insider trading, she said. Round two was over, and Nancy Pelosi's role in January 6th had been completely exposed. But the financial corruption was about to make everything else look like small-time politics. If Nancy Pelosi thought the previous revelations were devastating, she had no idea what was coming next. Tulsi reached for her third folder, this one bulging with Securities and Exchange Commission documents, Treasury Department financial analysis, and FBI forensic accounting reports. Congresswoman Pelosi, Tulsi began, with the methodical precision of someone who'd studied every detail. Let's discuss how you and your family have built a $200 million fortune through systematic insider trading while serving in Congress. The number stopped everyone cold. $200 million on a congressional salary of $174,000 per year. That's impossible, Jake Tapper said, clearly struggling to process the magnitude of the accusation. Even with investment returns, congressional salaries couldn't generate that kind of wealth. You're absolutely right, Tulsi replied, which is why the SEC, working with Treasury Department forensic accountants, conducted a comprehensive analysis of every Pelosi family trade over the past 20 years. She opened the folder to reveal what appeared to be hundreds of pages of trading records, each one meticulously documented and cross-referenced. What they found represents the most systematic abuse of insider information in the history of Congress. Tulsi began reading from the official SEC investigation report. Between 2004 and 2024, Paul Pelosi executed 2,847 stock trades with a success rate of 98.7%. The statistical probability of achieving this success rate through legitimate market analysis is approximately 1 in 7 billion. She let that sink in for a moment. For context, the best hedge fund managers in the world typically achieve success rates of around 60 to 70%. Warren Buffett, considered the greatest investor of all time, averages about 65%. But Pelosi was achieving 98.7%. It was statistically impossible without inside information. The pattern is always the same, Tulsi continued. Nancy receives classified briefings about upcoming legislation, economic policy, or regulatory changes. Within hours, Paul executes trades that profit from that information. She began detailing specific examples, that made the corruption undeniable. March 15, 2020, Nancy receives classified briefing about COVID-19 economic impact and upcoming shutdown orders. March 16, 2020, Paul purchases $5.2 million in Zoom stock options. Zoom stock subsequently increases 600%. June 8, 2021, Banking Committee hearing on new financial regulations affecting credit card companies. June 7, 2021, Paul purchases $4.8 million in Visa call options. When the regulations are weakened due to Nancy's committee work, the options generate $3.2 million profit. October 12, 2022, classified intelligence briefing about Chinese military expansion affecting defense contractors. October 13, 2022, Paul purchases $6.1 million in Lockheed Martin and Raytheon stocks. Defense spending increases shortly after generating massive profits. Each example was more damning than the last. The timing was too perfect, the profits too consistent, the pattern too obvious. But the most shocking revelation was about the CHIPS Act. August 15, 2022, Nancy participates in final negotiations on the CHIPS and Science Act, which would provide massive subsidies to semiconductor companies. August 14, 2022, Paul purchases $8.2 million in NVIDIA call options. Tulsi's voice rose with indignation. The CHIPS Act passes with Nancy's support, providing billions in subsidies to companies like NVIDIA. Paul's options generate $4.1 million profit in 30 days. She leaned forward, her combat veteran intensity filling the studio. But here's the most disgusting part. While Nancy was using classified intelligence to make her family rich, American soldiers were dying in Afghanistan with outdated equipment because defense spending was being diverted to these corporate subsidies. The human cost made the financial corruption even more reprehensible. American service members died while the Pelosi's got rich off the same military-industrial complex. The SEC investigation also revealed coordination with other congressional families, Tulsi continued. The Pelosi's weren't operating alone. They were part of a network, including the Clintons, the Bidens, and dozens of other political families systematically looting the American economy. She produced bank records showing wire transfers between various political family trusts, all timed to coincide with major legislative actions.
Want to take the next step with Entivio? Then it's time to talk to your healthcare provider. With Entivio, you may be able to pay as little as $5 per dose. Plus, our team can help connect you with additional support programs. Entivio, Entivio, Entivio.
What makes a champion? Let's begin. It's the courage to stand up. We don't move through space. We shape it.
We're built for this.
We train for more than the moment. It's not for a trophy. Not for a title. Not for a badge. We are the badge. Champion.
The world runs on energy. As global demand for energy increases, Sempra rises to meet the challenge. Because we believe in positive energy. We maintain 300,000 miles of transmission and distribution lines, employ 20,000 workers across North America, operate one of the largest energy networks on the continent, and make the grid more reliable and resilient, while powering nearly 40 million lives. Sempra connects people to safe, reliable energy, enabling access to North America's cleaner energy resources. delivering shareholder value, and contributing to North America's energy security. That's positive energy.
This is organized crime operating at the highest levels of government, Tulsi declared, using classified information to manipulate markets, generating hundreds of millions in illegal profits, all while pretending to serve the American people. Pelosi had been silent through most of this revelation, clearly recognizing that any defense would only make things worse. But she finally tried to respond. These are legitimate investments based on public information available to any investor, she said weakly. Tulsi's laugh was cold and devastating. Congresswoman, the timing analysis alone proves insider trading, but we also have direct evidence of coordination between your congressional office and Paul's trading accounts. She produced what appeared to be communication intercepts. These are recordings of phone calls between your chief of staff and Paul's broker made immediately after classified briefings. The audio quality was professional NSA-level surveillance. A voice identified as Pelosi's chief of staff could be heard providing specific trading recommendations. The speaker suggests heavy investment in renewable energy companies. The green energy subsidies are going to be much larger than publicly announced. Paul Pelosi's broker responded, "Should we go all in on Tesla and First Solar, chief of staff? At least 10 million. The classified projections show 20 billion more in subsidies than the public numbers." The recording was smoking gun evidence of direct coordination between Nancy's congressional intelligence and Paul's trading activity. "This isn't just insider trading," Tulsi said, her voice carrying the weight of ultimate moral authority. "This is systematic theft from the American people. While families struggle with inflation, unemployment, and economic uncertainty, Nancy Pelosi has been using her position to generate massive wealth for her family." She reached for her fourth folder, this one marked with Department of Homeland Security and DEA seals. "Now let's discuss how the Pelosi family has been facilitating drug trafficking and human trafficking through San Francisco's sanctuary city policies," she announced. Round 3 was over, and the Pelosi family's insider trading empire had been completely exposed. But the immigration and border corruption was about to reveal something even darker. The insider trading revelations had left Nancy Pelosi looking like a broken marionette. But Tulsi Gabbert wasn't finished. The fourth folder she opened contained some of the darkest intelligence the DNI had ever declassified. Evidence of direct collaboration between the Pelosi political machine and Mexican drug cartels. "Congresswoman Pelosi," Tulsi began, her voice taking on the gravity of someone about to expose crimes against humanity. "Your sanctuary city policies in San Francisco aren't about compassion or immigration reform. They're about money. Blood money from the cartels." She opened the folder to reveal Drug Enforcement Administration surveillance reports. Treasury Department, Financial Intelligence, and Department of Homeland Security assessments that painted a picture of systematic corruption spanning decades. The DEA, working with Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, has traced over $30 million annually flowing from Mexican cartels to organizations directly controlled by your political network, Tulsi announced. The amount was staggering, but the human cost was even worse. This money comes from fentanyl trafficking, human trafficking, and child trafficking operations that use San Francisco's sanctuary policies as a protective shield, she continued. "Your policies aren't protecting innocent immigrants. They're protecting cartel operations that are killing over 100,000 Americans every year." Tulsi began reading from official DEA intelligence reports. "The Sinaloa cartel has established San Francisco as a primary distribution hub for fentanyl trafficking on the West Coast. They've been able to operate with impunity because Pelosi-backed sanctuary policies prevent cooperation between local law enforcement and federal authorities. She produced surveillance photographs showing meetings between known cartel representatives and officials from organizations that received funding from Pelosi's political network. These photos were taken by DEA surveillance teams documenting regular meetings between cartel money laundering operations and the San Francisco Community Justice Network, an organization that received $4.2 million in federal grants approved by Nancy Pelosi's office. The connection was direct and undeniable. Federal money flowing to organizations that were coordinating with cartel operations. But the most horrific revelation was about human trafficking. DHS has documented trafficking routes that bring unaccompanied minors through the Mexican border, transport them through San Francisco's sanctuary network, and deliver them to trafficking operations across the United States. Tulsi explained, her voice heavy with the weight of protecting children. She displayed official DHS assessment reports. In the past 3 years alone, over 12,000 children have disappeared from San Francisco's immigration processing centers. 12,000 children. Congresswoman Pelosi, do you know where they are? The silence in the studio was deafening. 12,000 missing children. Our intelligence shows that many of these children are being trafficked through networks directly connected to organizations that receive funding from your political machine. Tulsi continued, you're not just enabling cartel operations, you're facilitating the trafficking of children. She produced audio recordings that were even more damning than the previous evidence. This is a recorded conversation between a cartel representative and a San Francisco city official intercepted by DEA surveillance operations, Tulsi announced. The audio was chilling. A voice speaking Spanish with English translation overlays, the Congresswoman's people have confirmed that the new sanctuary expansion will include transportation protection. Our operations will be completely safe from federal interference. An American voice responded, as long as the payments continue through the usual channels, you'll have full protection. Nancy controls the federal oversight, so there's no risk of investigation. Spanish voice and the children's roots. American voice, protected. The family separation protocols give us perfect cover for the transfers. The recording was devastating evidence of direct coordination between cartel operations and Pelosi's political network to facilitate child trafficking. Pelosi had been silent through most of these revelations, but she finally attempted a response. This is completely fabricated. I would never be involved in anything that harms children. Tulsi's response was swift and devastating. The financial records don't lie, Congresswoman. Your family has received millions in payments disguised as consulting fees and real estate transactions, all traced back to cartel money laundering operations. She produced Treasury Department forensic